It's better preserved down here.
Yeah, it's better preserved.
You to see the actual walls, and the inside is they dug and piled up on the inside. So this is inside, that side.
So anyway,
we came from that direction, though, right? We came from that way to this way.
We've come across it a couple of different times. We came from the inside. Now that's outside.
Yeah, but when we drove, I mean, the road
came
from
the
that
outside.
way.
Yes.
So the inside is still. I
the
thought we
north.
were coming from the inside.
Yeah. So this is north, and the center of the kingdom's to the north.
Okay.
So essentially, she ordered for this to be built as a monument to her greatness because she was childless, and in traditional society, you know, a child is seen to be the ultimate preservation of your legacy. So when you do not have a child, because she didn't have a child, she wanted something, a reminder of her stature, because she obviously was this really, really accomplished woman. Now the mythology was that it was dug by legions and legions of giants, of 10-foot tall giants, who actually dug the pits, and which obviously there's no video evidence of that clearly. So, but we'll take their word for it. Now,
Elijah one.
Well, fair enough. He's probably not too. It's actually not far from these parts, Yeah. So now the Patrick Darling's research, was one of the greatest catalysts for the information we have about the Sungbo's Eredo, and that's it was a humongous effort, of physical efforts, intellectual efforts, and an exhibition of mental strength. Because from the account that Chief Sonny gave, they spent close to Chief Sonny is the old guy we saw who was ill, who has been the caretaker for aeons. And in fact, if you look at his visitor's book, if I may digress, actually has a record of every single visitor, or at least almost all the visitors who have come to the Eredo, which is why he was deemed to be the point of contact. That's an aside. Anyway, Darling's work wasn't the first academic research into the Eredo. As I told you, Professor Lloyd came here in 1959 and actually did, actually documented the Eredo, but not in great detail, and didn't have that much publicity because obviously in a period before the Great Information Age, the study seemed to be some obscure piece of research in some obscure backwater. But then, locally, there had been quite a bit of traction in terms of information on the Eredo itself. And as I said, I actually have a newspaper report from 1950 in which an amateur Nigerian historian actually wrote about the mythology of Sungbo herself. Now, Darling's surmise was that she was the Queen of Sheba. Yeah. Now, the difficulty with that is that there's something like a 2,000-year differential, which is hard to surmise. If it's like 120 years, it's easier to massage, but 2,000 years, where do you start? So clearly there was a bit of a difficulty with that, But then the account which I read of all the ancient mythology was that she was the descendant of one of the Queen of Sheba's courtiers. If there's a female version of that, who essentially she was a female staff of the Queen of Sheba herself. She's a descendant, and that the lady came back from the service of the Queen of Sheba with great wealth amassed from her tenure with her, and that wealth stayed in the family. And having said that, she herself, Biliksu Sungbo, was a woman of immense independent means. You would have to be able, as I said, to be able to order, because one thing's for certain. These things were dug physically because we're actually standing within them. So there's physical evidence that it exists. The reason why is because you're actually standing on it. Now, all we can rely on as in the modern day is the oral account of those passed down over centuries. And that's all. The oral account we have is that it was ordered by Bilkisu Sungbo herself. Now, clearly, it meant she was a woman of immense means. I emphasize this and I repeat this again because there's also the issues of gender empowerment and the place of women in traditional African societies. Actually, that's a different study in itself. I cannot pretend to have done the extent of research that Patrick Darling has done, or indeed Professor Lloyd has done, but I can say for certain that independent evidence, because she was this rampart, this circumference, this circular moat system, if you want to call it that, encircled the ancient kingdom of Ijebu. But then we do the historical evidence I have, which at least I know I can claim to be something of an expert of, is that the ancient kingdom of Ijebu is was a 15th century creation. Now, if it was a 15th century creation, how could the Eredo be 1,000 years old and be surrounding something that existed that only came into being 400 years after? I think that yes, it surrounded Ijebu land, but I think its origins go back to establish a link with a similar system of ramparts, being the Benin moat system, because the Benin moat system was actually the construction started in 1280 on the instructions of Oba Ogola, which was at least 200 years before the Ijebu kingdom was supposed to have been founded. And let's not forget that Ijebu itself was founded by I won't say a deity, but fighter Obanta. Obanta was the founder of Ijebu, and Ijebu was founded on the instructions or the permission, express permission of the Oba of Benin. Now, the nexus between Ijebu land, moat systems, between Ijebu land and moat systems is what? Benin. Because Benin had a link with Ijebu. Ijebu's creation was sanctioned by the Oba. Benin had a moat system at least 200 years before the founding of Ijebu. Meanwhile, this place was dated to 1000 AD. Now, as we know, I'm not an expert on carbon dating. I'm not an archaeologist, I'm an historian. But then, with carbon dating, there's a margin of error. So that one theory is that this had a linkage, at least a political linkage, with the Benin moat system. How that is, I don't think enough work has not been done on this. I mean, Fritz mentioned that there was not a lot of information available in scientific data. That's because there isn't. Right? The two main studies done on this have been Lloyd's and Darling's. Now, I have a great deal, as I said, I have a great deal of respect for Dr. Darling. But then, what he's done is essentially he did not cover the full circumference of the Eredo. He did not. Because I know that because Chief Sani told me as much. He said they spent 2 months in the rainy season. They got to a point and they could not go any further. But that is not to discount his immense work. I couldn't possibly spend a week here. He spent 2 months. And that in itself is hugely significant. With minimal funding, he covered at least 3/4 of what should be. But that in itself also leaves several questions answered as to where it ends. I know that I've heard accounts about it's being cited from space, but I think that in itself cannot answer the questions as to its full extent. Whether it's the circumference, whether it's part of a series, whether it's a continuation of a system that extends all the way to Benin, we are not certain. Not enough work has been done, and you can tell that not enough work has been done based on the state of the place you're in now. When Darling did his work, if you look at the photographs on the internet, it was very clearly defined. You could actually see the smooth wall. You could see it was well clear, because obviously, I mean, Chief Sani and his colleagues had done a great deal of work in clearing the place. The section that Darling took a photograph of is around where we are now. I'm not quite sure whether it's here or down there, but look at the deterioration. And that's part of his own sadness, because he had done his work and he hoped that others would take the mantle and carry on reclamation. Now, if you go further down, I think is it Pan-Atlantic University, one other university, close Pan-African University, has actually built its outer boundaries are built on the wall, have actually abutted onto the wall and caused deterioration to the wall. And a good friend of the Field Society, Mike Prime, brought this, and that's where Gerard had been doing so, brought this to the attention of the university to say, actually guys, do you realize that your walls, that part of your reclamation, that your construction work has abutted onto the wall and is actually deteriorating the wall even further? And they were totally incredulous. They actually had no idea. And I believe they actually have an archaeology department. They had no idea that they were building on the wall. Now, a lot of work had been done by Chief Sani and many others in trying to get the Lagos State government interested in at least reclaiming this place. And when I spoke to him when we last spoke on a one-to-one, because I did some filming here for my documentary, and he was like, please, that it would take less than 4 million naira to at least restore a section of the wall to its, not necessarily original state, but at least something similar to original state by clearing as much as it could. I mean, obviously there are environmental issues, because you're going to be clearing down trees that so many of them are as much as several, maybe a couple of 100 years old. Maybe not this one here, but a couple of trees are a couple of 100 years old along the line, and there are environmental issues involved, involved in that. But at least an effort should have been made in trying to preserve this place to its not necessarily original state, but at least something akin to that. He had traveled, he had traipsed the walls of Alausa, and nothing was forthcoming. From the signs we can see, because I have not been here in several months, because I've been away in the UK, and I can see that there's certainly signs of some kind of government presence, even if it's just signboards. But I mean, apart from the signboards, I've seen nothing else. You know what I mean? And all I would say to you basically is that it's, I don't know what influence anyone has, but whatever can be done really should be done by whoever it is, and it goes beyond just, charging gate fees to view the place. That's what I'll say. So, to answer, I mean, I don't have, do you have any other questions?
Well, Ed, so tell us, what are the ideas why this was built? Besides the monument, but it was not defensive?
There are two theories. One, a defensive rampart system, and two, for spiritual purposes, to surround the kingdom. That's exactly that's mythology, because there's no scientific evidence. It was to surround. Because I've told you that the origins of the kingdom that it's supposed to be surrounding, and the dating of the ramparts is a big differential, and that's a conundrum.
I've also heard that this may have been an
spiritual
elephant trap, keeping elephants out of here.
That's one angle, but I don't think they would have removed 1 million cubic feet of sand just because of elephants. You see, it had to have a spiritual significance or military significance for there to have been so much investment in time effort and money, because it's money. So there had to be a spiritual or defensive, because you had to be fighting for your life, and not just from elephants, because how many elephants? I mean, 200 kilometers to fight to. No. That was one theory. I mean, elephants obviously it will stop them, but that would not be the reason why they would have had to do that.
What's the estimate of how long it took to construct these ramparts?
There's no definitive statement of what it would, but one thing's for certain: 1 million cubic feet, right? Judging it would have taken at least a couple of centuries to do this. A couple of centuries, and I'm talking about hundreds of men, thousands of people to do this. 200 and something kilometers, 1 million cubic feet of sand.
Huge.
Hundreds, and at least, because Benin took 500 years, but Benin is different. Benin is 6,400 kilometers, so it took about 400 or 500 years, and it was stop and start. But I can imagine that this was a focused, dedicated effort, But there's no way this work could have been done and completed within the life of one person. Impossible.
Yeah, but why did they continue the work so late after the decision was made? Because for me it's 3 generations, 4.
Yes.
So they could be motivated in a so long time to continue.
Oh yes.
Something maybe they could not understand what it was for.
No, there's no way they didn't understand what it was for. It was, as I said, there are 2 reasons that I think are plausible, and that's defense and spiritual. These are 2 things that are perpetuated from generation to generation. The need to preserve your spiritual shrine. There's a shrine in my town that has existed for 500 years, and it is well preserved, even from generation of priest to priest. Now, there's also another angle to this, and that's a very intelligent question. There's also an angle to this. You may or may not have heard of the Nsude pyramids. The Nsude pyramids exist in eastern Nigeria near Enugu. Now, the pyramids were almost like the step pyramids of Saqqara in Egypt.